Hello and welcome to Mr. Manley History Teacher's latest video on the Conflict and Tension 1918 to 1939 paper topic 3 recap video. We'll talk through first of all the 3 different components of topic 3, what they are. Then we'll start looking into what each of those components involves and what you'll have to know in order to successfully answer the questions in the conflict and tension assessment paper. So let's get started. So here are the 3 different parts of the topic 3 conflict and tension 1918 to 1939 AQA unit. And initially we're going to look into Hitler's foreign policy aims that were outlined in his book Mein Kampf. Then we're going to look into appeasement and the steps to war in the 1930s. And then finally we're going to be looking into the Nazi-Soviet pact and the Second World War being declared. So starting off with Hitler's foreign policy aims. So a mnemonic you can use to remember Hitler's foreign policy aims is GAST. And the G stands for Hitler wanting Germany to be a glorious country and to have a strong army again, to be a great European power and to have a well-respected army, navy and air force. The A stands for Anschluss, which means union in German, and in particular Hitler and many nationalistic Germans wanted Austria and Germany to unite under Hitler's rule, of course, according to Hitler. The first S stands for space, and the German term for living room or living space is Lebensraum. And in order to gain this living space or living room, Hitler and the Nazis wanted to take over territory in Eastern Europe to provide extra space for the German people. The second S stands for securing friendship or an alliance, or at least at the very minimum a non-aggression pact with either Italy or Britain, because despite the fact that Hitler had many countries in his mind that he wanted to take over, he had some limited respect, not much respect, but some limited respect towards Italy and Britain. The ED stands for ending or destroying the Treaty of Versailles, because Hitler blamed German politicians for signing the Treaty of Versailles in the first place, and he absolutely resented most of the terms. In fact, he resented all of the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. So he wanted to end the restrictions of the Treaty of Versailles on Germany. And he states many of his aims in his book, as I mentioned already, Mein Kampf, which he wrote while in prison in 1924. So the second part of the topic 3 conflict and tension paper is appeasement and the steps to war in the 1930s. And I'm going to give you a snapshot of the 4 main parts of appeasement in the 1930s, starting off with rearmament. Hitler, from 1933 onwards, when he became Chancellor of Germany and then Führer, at first secretly started to rearm the German army. However, as time went on, he became more brazen and more public about it. And in 1935, he introduced conscription, which means that all men of a certain age had to join the army. Now, Hitler's attempts at rearming Germany were made slightly easier by Britain's support of Germany to rearm its navy by signing a naval agreement with Hitler in 1935, basically allowing Germany to build a fleet as long as it was no more than 35% of Britain. So in some ways, Britain was almost egging Hitler and Germany on to rearm, which was quite bizarre in hindsight, looking at what happened in the latter part of the 1930s. In 1936, specifically in March 1936, Hitler decided to reoccupy the Rhineland. Now, the Rhineland, under the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, had been demilitarized, so Germany was banned from putting troops into that region of Germany. However, in March 1936, Hitler decided that the League of Nations, which is part of topic 2 of the conflict and tension unit. And if you click on the link in the top right corner of the screen now, it will take you to a video on the strengths and weaknesses of the League of Nations. But Hitler believed that the League of Nations at this time, by March 1936, was weak. And so it was the right time to invade with troops into the Rhineland part of Germany. So France and Britain essentially allowed Hitler to do this. However, had they attacked Germany, then the German army at this time wasn't strong enough to really fight back against them. And Hitler even admitted that had France and Britain done this, then he wouldn't have been able to reoccupy and remilitarize the Rhineland. However, when the German soldiers marched into the Rhineland, they were actually greeted by German civilians who gave them flowers, and it was seen as a real success and a real coup for Hitler at this time. Another significant event that happened during this period of appeasement was Anschluss with Austria. Don't forget, this was one of Hitler's foreign policy aims that he made clear in his book Mein Kampf. And on the 12th of March 1938, German troops marched unopposed into Austria. There were many Austrians that welcomed Anschluss, or union with Germany, but in order to give some legitimacy to his union with Austria, Hitler held a rigged referendum. So there were brown-shirted Nazis looking over the shoulders of voters in Austria in March 1938, and also the ballot in which the referendum was held on had a big circle for voting for yes for Anschluss with Germany, and a very small circle voting where you could vote for no with union for Germany. So pretty much 99% of Austrians voted to join with Germany. So it was a rigged referendum. It wasn't a very fair or free referendum that took place. Then in May of 1938, Hitler turned his attention to Czechoslovakia, and 3 million Germans lived in a part of Czechoslovakia known as the Sudetenland. Now, after complaining that Germans were being mistreated by the Czech government in the Sudetenland, Hitler threatened war in September 1938. In response to this, the Prime Minister of Britain at the time, Neville Chamberlain, arranged a meeting in Munich with the leaders of France, Germany and Italy. So Mussolini and Hitler also attended this meeting. And they come to an agreement that Germany can take over the Sudetenland. Bear in mind, the Czech government wasn't invited or involved in this meeting. They had no say in it, of course. But Germany was allowed to take over the Sudetenland. After this meeting, Chamberlain returned to Britain claiming he'd established peace in our time. And he held a piece of paper which had been signed by Hitler that he wouldn't continue to invade other European countries after the Munich conference. However, following the agreement, Britain and France actually sped up their rearmament plans, and after this, in 1939, Hitler did actually invade the rest of Czechoslovakia. After this, he then made the Nazi-Soviet pact, which we'll look at in a second, and the Second World War started on 1st of September 1939. Finally, the last topic that I mentioned we'll be looking at, the Nazi-Soviet pact of August 1939. Now, Germany and Russia essentially agreed not to attack each other. They agreed this for 10 years, that they wouldn't declare war on each other for 10 years after this pact was signed. And they agreed that they would divide and split Poland between them. Now, Hitler felt confident that Britain and France wouldn't help Poland because of the fact they'd backed down over Czechoslovakia and they'd appeared weak during the Sudeten crisis and the Munich conference. So Hitler was confident that Britain and France wouldn't declare war on Germany. However, as we know, when Germany did invade Poland in September 1939, on the 1st, just 2 days later, on the 3rd of September, Britain declared war on Germany. Why did Stalin sign this, even though ideologically he was completely opposed to Hitler? Hitler was a Nazi, Stalin was a communist. You'd think they would never sign a pact like this. However, Stalin signed it because he'd grown impatient with Britain and France delaying to sign a pact with him. And he was angry that he wasn't invited to the Munich conference. Czechoslovakia is a country in Eastern Europe, and with Nazi Germany taking over Czechoslovakia, it was getting closer and closer to the Soviet Union. So Stalin felt let down by Britain and France that he hadn't been invited to the Munich conference. Why did it happen? Well, for Stalin, it gave him time to prepare for war. The Soviet army wasn't particularly strong at this point in 1939. Stalin also hoped to gain from the pact as well. He believed that if France and Britain fought against Germany, it would weaken all those countries and give the USSR a better chance to defend itself. Like I mentioned, Stalin was unhappy with Britain and France, with a failure to negotiate with the Soviet Union. And Stalin was concerned about the strength of Germany in 1939. So he believed that by taking over part of Poland, it would give him more of a buffer against Germany. Poland was created at the end of the First World War. It was made up of former German and Russian territories, and both Hitler and Stalin wanted to take over territory in Poland again. Now, even though Stalin suspected Hitler would turn against him, and we can see that in this top cartoon in the top right corner of the video, even though there was mistrust between Hitler and Stalin, signing the pact bought the USSR time to build up the USSR's army, as I've already mentioned. Okay, and we can see some cartoons on the right hand side of the video which demonstrate the mistrust between Hitler and Stalin despite signing this pact. Don't forget, this is a pact, it's not an alliance that was signed by Hitler and Stalin. So if Germany or the USSR declared war on another country or went to war with another country, Germany or the USSR wouldn't join in and fight automatically as well. It was just a non-aggression pact. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe to my page, Mr. Manley History Teacher.